Welcome back to Haunted Graves After Dark. Tonight's story is one of the most disturbing cases ever recorded in Edinburgh, Scotland. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Comment your country or city below. This story travels far beyond the grave, and I want to see how wide our haunted circle truly reaches. Now, let's begin. They say the dead can't speak. But in 1993, a 13-year-old girl named Emily Smith proved them wrong. The phone rang at 2:14 a.m. Detective Malcolm Mac Rennie had dozed off on his sofa, the TV buzzing softly in the background, a half-finished mug of tea cooling on the table beside him. The rain outside hammered against his flat windows in Leith, the kind of cold, relentless Scottish downpour that felt like it was trying to wash away the whole city. He expected a routine call, maybe a noise complaint or a drunk fighting his reflection. Edinburgh always had a few of those at this hour. But when he lifted the receiver, he didn't hear dispatch. He heard a child. "Please, please come back for me," the trembling voice whispered. Mac froze, muscles locking. He knew that voice. He'd heard it on tapes. He'd heard it in interviews. He had heard it crying from a mother in the hospital morgue. It was Emily Smith. A girl found dead just 3 days ago. "Emily," he whispered without meaning to, throat tightening. "Emily, is that you?" The line crackled like something breathing through static. "I'm still here," she said. He came back for me." Mac's blood ran cold. She had been found in Calton Hill Cemetery, bruised, half-buried, eyes still open, as if waiting for someone to notice her. Mac had been there. He had zipped the bag himself. He had watched her mother collapse to the floor. Emily was dead. And yet her voice now trembled through the phone like chilled wind. "Emily, listen," Mac said, grabbing his coat with one hand. "Where are you calling from?" There was a soft gasp. A breath. A tiny, terrified pause. "Still here," she whispered. Then the line went dead. Mac stared at the receiver, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Logic screamed this couldn't be real. Phones don't connect to the dead. Voices don't come back after bodies are in the ground. But instinct, sharp, primal, unignorable, told him otherwise. Something was wrong. Something was unfinished. And something, or someone, was still out there. He snatched his keys, threw on his coat, and stepped into the storm. Edinburgh at night felt like a city holding old secrets. The ancient stone buildings, the winding closes, the cobblestone streets slick with rain, it all seemed to watch silently as Mac drove through the shadows. Even the streetlights flickered like they were nervous. Calton Hill Cemetery came into view, dark and sprawling under the storm clouds. The iron gates stood half open, the wind making them groan like something waking from a nightmare. Mac parked and stepped out. The cold slapped him immediately, sharp and biting. He hesitated only once. What if someone was mocking him? What if the killer was using the girl's voice? What if this was a trap? He pushed through the gates anyway. The cemetery greeted him with rows of leaning tombstones and crumbling mausoleums. Names etched on graves blurred by rain. Statues of angels that looked more like watchers than protectors. His boots sank into the muddy path as he moved deeper in. He aimed his flashlight across the graves, expecting a shadow to dart, a laugh to echo, anything. But the cemetery was too quiet. Too still. The rain softened, like even the sky was afraid to make noise. Mac reached the area where they had found Emily. A temporary wooden cross marked her grave. A soaked stuffed rabbit lay beside it, one bead eye missing. Fresh flowers, wilted from the cold, leaned sadly in the mud. Then he saw it. Footprints. 2 sets. One small. One large. Both recent. Mac crouched, brushing his hand lightly across the smaller prints. Child-sized. Exactly Emily's size. His breath fogged heavily in front of him. Footsteps approached. No, breathing. Behind him. Deep. Slow. Too close. He spun around, flashlight raised. A figure stood near the crooked tombstones. Not moving. Not hiding. Just watching. Police. Mac barked. Don't move. The figure didn't step back. Didn't run. Didn't even flinch. As Mac drew closer, the beam of his flashlight cut through the rain and finally lit the figure's face. A girl. Small. Thin. Frail. Emily. Mac's breath caught. Her jacket was the same pale blue one she'd gone missing in. The left sleeve torn. Mud crusted along her side. Her hair clung in wet strands across her forehead. Her skin was drained of color, bluish around the lips. But her eyes. Her eyes were hollow, like someone looking through him rather than at him. Emily, he whispered. She blinked slowly. He's still here, she said in the same trembling whisper from the phone. He's still looking for me. Mac stepped closer, heart beating hard enough to shake his ribs. This wasn't possible. Dead children didn't stand in graveyards. Didn't speak. Didn't leave footprints. But she looked so real. So scared. Emily, who came back? Mac asked gently. Who hurt you? She didn't answer. Her eyes darted over her shoulder toward the dark, twisted part of the cemetery where tombs formed a narrow corridor. He's coming, she breathed. A sharp gust of wind tore through the graves, rattling the trees. Mac felt the temperature plunge around him. His breath fogged thickly, swirling like smoke. Emily's outline shimmered. Her hair lifted as if something invisible brushed past her. Mac reached out, touching her shoulder. And his fingers passed through her. Not through flesh. Through cold air. Through nothing. Emily flickered like a candle in the wind. Her shape broke apart in fragments of shadow and rain, then reformed shakily. Mac, she whispered, her voice glitching, warping, changing pitch. Don't, help, run. Her form spasmed again, splitting like static on an old tape. Then she vanished. The rain fell where she had stood. Mac stumbled back, breath shallow. Something moved in the darkness. A heavy step. Another. And another. Not ghostly. Not drifting. Human. Large. Deliberate. Breathing thick, wet breaths, like someone injured, or hungry. Mac raised his flashlight. It flickered. Died. A silhouette moved between the graves. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Watching him with something that wasn't curiosity. But intent. Mac's hand went to his holster. But the voice that spoke stopped him cold. A hoarse whisper from the shadows. You shouldn't have come alone, detective. The darkness seemed to close around him. And somewhere, faint but real, a child's voice echoed. Run. Detective Mac Rennie's pulse hadn't slowed since that impossible call. Emily Smith, the dead girl, had vanished before his eyes. And now, the presence, tall, broad, and menacing, moved between the gravestones, silent but deliberate, as though it had been waiting for him all along. Mac gripped his coat tighter, the rain soaking through, and scanned the cemetery. The silence pressed in like wet cloth. Each step he took crunched in the mud, the sound unnaturally loud in the still night. Something was watching him, something that wasn't meant to exist in the living world. A flash of movement caught his eye, a shadow that wasn't his own. The silhouette darted behind a mausoleum, melting into the darkness. He moved cautiously, holster in hand, every sense alert. The graveyard had always been eerie, yes, but tonight felt different. The air was heavier, colder, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. He remembered the footprints. Small ones. Large ones. Both real, both fresh. Then came the whisper. Soft. Close. Right at his ear. Detective. Mac spun. No one. Just the mist curling over the graves, and the faint dripping of water from the stone angels. He forced himself forward, toward the back of the cemetery, where the shadows clustered like black water. The mausoleums leaned close together, narrow corridors between them perfect for hiding, perfect for watching. Something moved again, fast this time. A flicker, barely seen in the rain-soaked darkness. He raised his flashlight, praying it wouldn't fail like before. A figure emerged. Not Emily. Not yet. But human enough to make him stiffen. Broad shoulders, tall, the face hidden in the hood of a dark coat. The figure stopped at the base of a tomb, silent. Then it turned. And walked straight toward him. Mac swallowed hard. "Stop," he shouted, voice cracking. "I'm a cop." No response. The figure's movements were fluid, deliberate, and terrifyingly quiet. Mac could hear only the rain, only his own pulse. He stepped forward. "Identify yourself." Still nothing. Suddenly, the figure paused, tilting its head. Mac caught a glimpse of a glint in the hood, a pale, reflective surface. Eyes. 2 eyes that seemed too large, too knowing, too dead. Mac felt ice crawl down his spine. He took another step, then froze. A low, hollow sound came from the tombs behind him. Not a voice. Not a growl. Something in between. Then a hand reached out, from the ground. Mud and rain splashed as a pale, small hand clawed at the earth near Emily's grave. Mac stumbled backward, tripping over a stone. His flashlight skittered across the ground, beam flashing erratically. The hand disappeared. And then reappeared. Clawing. Scratching. Mac forced himself to his feet, heart hammering. He had no choice. He had to move closer. Whoever, or whatever, was out here, it had a connection to Emily. He needed answers. Step by step, he approached. The figure had stopped moving now, watching him like a predator. And then he saw her. Emily Smith. Standing behind the figure, small and pale. She raised her hand, pointing toward the tomb. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. And then she was gone again, flickering like a broken reflection. Mac cursed under his breath. He was losing it. Sleep deprivation, stress, and the memory of her lifeless body might have been twisting his senses. Yet the footprints, the shadows, the moving hand, everything insisted otherwise. He circled the tombs, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. His boots sank into the mud as he reached a large mausoleum at the very edge of the cemetery. The iron door was slightly ajar, the darkness inside almost liquid. Mac hesitated. The sense of being watched was overwhelming. Something inside the tomb stirred. He could hear faint scratching. Then a whisper. "Detective, come closer." The voice was Emily's. Against all reason, against all survival instinct, Mac pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air smelled of wet earth and decay. The flashlight illuminated stacked coffins, some cracked and rotting. Faded inscriptions glinted under the weak beam. Then the scratching stopped. A sudden silence fell, heavy and unnatural. Mac strained his ears. Then he saw it, one coffin slightly shifted, not aligned with the others. He froze. Another whisper. "Closer this time, please, help me." Mac's hand shook as he reached for the coffin. The wood was damp and cold under his fingers. He tried to lift the lid. Nothing. It felt impossibly heavy. Then the lid moved. Slowly. Trembling as though something alive pushed from inside. And there she was. Emily. Or what looked like her. Her eyes wide, terrified. A scream caught in her throat. She tried to climb out, but the coffin seemed to resist, holding her like a trap. Mac yanked at the lid with all his strength. The figure outside stepped forward suddenly, blocking the doorway. Broad, silent, imposing. Eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Emily screamed. The sound echoed, bouncing off the stone walls. The figure raised a hand. A single, long finger pointed at Mac. The air around it shimmered like heat over cobblestones. A low moan rolled through the tomb, as if the dead were waking. Mac stepped back, almost losing his footing. Then something changed. The figure blinked. Its hood fell back slightly. A face. Familiar. Terrifying. "Detective," the figure said. Emily's voice. Distorted. Hollow. Not quite right. Mac's stomach churned. He realized the impossible truth: Emily was both in the coffin and somewhere else. Some part of her was trapped. Some part was walking with the shadow. He had only one thought. Save her. The floor beneath him shifted. Loose stones cracked. From the shadows, hundreds of tiny scratches erupted on the walls, forming strange, jagged patterns. Symbols. Ancient symbols that made his skin crawl. Emily's ghostly form in the coffin reached a hand out. The other Emily, the shadow version, whispered, "Detective, run, or stay and join us." Mac felt the pull, like gravity, like the hands of the dead. He almost fell forward. Almost gave in. But he grabbed the nearest stone coffin edge and pulled Emily out. Her body was cold, limp, but alive, somehow alive. The shadow figure recoiled, letting out a low, rattling sound that seemed like both a scream and a warning. Mac didn't wait. He bolted toward the exit, dragging Emily behind him. The mausoleum door slammed shut behind them as they ran into the rain-soaked graveyard. Footsteps thundered behind them, but when Mac glanced back, the figure was gone. Only shadows remained, twisting between the tombstones like living smoke. They reached his car. Emily shivered violently. He wrapped her in his coat. "Detective, he's still here," she whispered, eyes wide and trembling. Mac looked around. The cemetery was quiet again. Too quiet. He started the car, headlights cutting through the fog. He couldn't shake the feeling that eyes followed them, from every dark corner. That whatever had taken part of Emily's spirit was still out there, waiting. "Emily," he said, voice low, steady. "I promise, we'll figure this out. We'll stop it." Her hand gripped his sleeve tightly, cold and clammy. "And if we don't?" she asked, voice barely audible over the rain. Mac swallowed. "Then we run. And we don't look back." Somewhere deep in the shadowed cemetery, a low whisper traveled over the gravestones. "You shouldn't have come alone, detective." And for the first time, Mac knew he hadn't. The night wasn't over. Not by far. And the real nightmare had only just begun. Detective Mac Rennie gripped the steering wheel tightly, Emily huddled in the passenger seat, her small body trembling. The rain had eased, leaving Edinburgh cloaked in fog, the kind that twisted the familiar into the unknowable. Every streetlight seemed like it hid a shadow watching, waiting. He glanced at her. Her lips were pale, her eyes wide, still haunted by what had happened at Calton Hill Cemetery. "You're safe, for now," he whispered, though even he didn't know if that was true. Safe wasn't a word that applied tonight. The call, the impossible voice, still rang in his ears. Emily's other self, the shadowy version in the mausoleum, it had followed, or perhaps it hadn't. But something had. Something patient, something that didn't blink. Mac decided to take her home first, then regroup. He had questions, too many, too impossible. How could a girl dead for days call on a phone? How could she be both lifeless in a coffin and alive in the world? The logic of it twisted his mind, but the evidence was undeniable. As he turned onto a narrow lane near the meadows, a figure appeared through the fog. Tall. Dark. Standing directly in the middle of the street. Mac slammed the brakes. Emily gasped. The figure didn't move. It was like a statue, black against the white fog, but there was an unnatural sway to its posture, a subtle distortion that set Mac's nerves screaming. He rolled the window down, voice low but firm. "Who's there?" No answer. Only a rustling, like wine through dead leaves. And then the whisper came again. "Detective, you cannot save her." Mac's fingers tightened around the wheel. The voice carried no accent, no inflection. It was Emily's. And yet it wasn't. The figure vanished into the mist. Mac felt the same pull, the icy sensation he'd felt at the mausoleum, like unseen fingers dragging at him, testing his resolve. He reached Emily's flat, helped her inside, and closed the door. The familiar warmth of a small apartment couldn't chase away the chill of the graveyard. She sat silently on the couch, knees pulled to her chest. I saw it, she whispered, voice breaking. In the window, watching me. My window. Max sank into a chair opposite her. It's following you, he said quietly. But why? What does it want? Emily shook her head. I don't know, but I can hear him, sometimes. When I sleep, he whispers my name. Mac ran his hands through his hair. The case had shifted. From missing girl, to corpse, to impossible haunting. Each layer more twisted than the last. He couldn't explain it logically, but he had to understand it. He had to. He spent hours going through reports, previous deaths, missing persons, anything resembling Emily's case. One name kept popping up, Margaret Kerr, a girl who disappeared from the same cemetery decades ago. Stories said her body was never found, her spirit supposedly trapped among the tombstones. Mac felt the pieces forming a puzzle too dark to see fully. There was a pattern in Edinburgh's cemeteries, one that spanned generations. And Emily was caught at its center. Hours passed. Emily finally fell asleep on the couch, a fragile shadow against the dim light. Mac stared at the window. The fog still thickened the streets outside. He couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching, not human eyes, but something else. He heard it then, a faint tapping, almost rhythmic, coming from the window. His heart leapt. A single finger tapped on the glass. Pale. Small. Emily stirred but didn't wake. Mac approached cautiously. The window was empty. The tapping stopped. Then a whisper, soft but chilling. Run, or join her. The fog outside twisted. Shapes formed. Figures of children, faces pale, eyes hollow, moving silently in the distance. They weren't real, but they were. Mac knew then that Emily's voice, the shadow figure, the ancient whispers, it was a trap. A call from the grave itself, designed to ensnare the living. And he was already inside. He resolved then. He wouldn't let Emily face this alone. Not now, not ever. Whatever force haunted Edinburgh's graveyards, he would confront it. But first, he needed a plan. He needed allies. He needed knowledge. Because the night was far from over. And somewhere, deep in the fog-drenched streets of Edinburgh, the shadow of the dead girl watched, waiting for the next move. Mac couldn't sleep. He stayed in the dim glow of his flat, maps of Edinburgh spread across the coffee table, old cemetery records scattered everywhere. Emily's breathing was shallow on the couch beside him, eyes closed, but Mac couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't truly at rest. Something had followed them home, something patient and cruel. He traced his fingers along the street surrounding Calton Hill Cemetery, trying to find a pattern. Years of police reports, missing children, strange calls, every decade had a story. Every century left whispers in the cobblestone streets. And now, in 1993, Emily Smith was trapped in the middle of it. The tapping at the window had returned. Faint, almost polite, yet deliberate. Mac grabbed his flashlight and peered into the fog-drenched night. Nothing. Just mist curling around the street lamps. Then the whisper, "Detective, you're too late." Mac froze. Too late for what? He gritted his teeth, forcing his fear down. Whatever this was, he had to understand it. The next day, he returned to the police archives. Dusty boxes held hundreds of missing persons reports, old cemetery records, and photographs. He found a file labeled Emily Smith, 1993, but beneath it, handwritten notes caught his eye. Other victims. Same pattern. Beware the shadow in the graves. The notes were unsigned, but the urgency was unmistakable. Hours passed. Every record he read added to the unease. Margaret Kerr, as he remembered, had disappeared decades ago. Others, children, teenagers, some found, some never returned. All had one thing in common: each had last been seen near Edinburgh's cemeteries at night. Mac's phone rang suddenly. Startled, he jumped. The number was unknown. Detective Rennie, a voice rasped. Emily's voice. But different. Twisted. "He's coming." The line went dead. Mac ran the number through the system. No trace. Not even a registered phone line. By nightfall, he knew he couldn't protect Emily by staying inside. He needed to confront the source. They returned to Calton Hill Cemetery, flashlight beams cutting through the fog. Emily stayed close, silent, trembling. Mac scanned every tombstone, every shadow. He felt eyes on him, hundreds of them. Not human. Hollow, patient, waiting. Then, in the distance, he saw it, a dark figure moving between graves. Slow, deliberate. The same shape Emily had described. The shadow that had haunted the mausoleum. Emily froze. "It knows I'm here," she whispered. Mac nodded, heart hammering. He didn't respond. He advanced slowly, flashlight steady, gun drawn, but his mind raced. How do you fight something that doesn't belong in the world of the living? The figure stopped. Then another emerged, more pale children, moving silently, circling. Their eyes hollow, unblinking. The ground beneath Mac seemed to thrum, as if the earth itself were alive and aware of his intrusion. Emily gasped. "Detective, it wants me back." Mac tightened his grip on her shoulder. "Not while I'm here," he said firmly. A whisper rose from the fog. Faint at first, then growing, echoing across the gravestones, "She belongs to the graves, she belongs to us." Mac felt a cold wind rush through him. The children's forms began to solidify, the shadows stretching unnaturally, merging into one massive dark presence. It seemed taller than any building, more vast than the cemetery itself. Emily clutched his arm, her nails digging in. Her lips trembled. "Detective, help me, please." The figure loomed closer. The fog swallowed it, then spat it back out, closer than before. Mac's flashlight flickered violently. Shadows danced on the stones. Something cold and solid brushed against his neck, a hand. Impossible. He fired a single shot. The sound exploded in the mist, echoing like thunder. The figure faltered, then dissipated into fog. For a moment, silence. Emily sank to her knees, trembling violently. Mac held her tightly, whispering reassurances he didn't feel. The shadow was gone, for now. But he knew it would return. The next day, Mac visited old spiritualists, historians, anyone who knew about the darker history of Edinburgh's graveyards. He learned that centuries ago, bodies were buried in mass, many unjustly. Legends spoke of restless spirits, of children trapped between worlds, of shadows that claimed those who came too close. Every story hinted at the same thing: the dead wanted something, and it was patient. Very patient. As night fell again, Mac sat by Emily's side. The city's fog pressed against the windows, whispering secrets. He knew the shadow would strike again. It wasn't just haunting the graveyards, it was hunting. And Emily, innocent and fragile, was at the center of its obsession. Mac stared into the dark streets beyond. He knew there was no turning back. The shadow wasn't just a ghost. It was a plan, centuries in the making. And tonight, it would begin its next move. The next night, Mac Rennie found himself pacing the small apartment he shared with Emily. The streets outside were empty, wrapped in thick fog that seemed to seep into every corner of the city. He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever haunted her, whatever followed them from Calton Hill, was growing bolder. Emily sat on the couch, knees drawn to her chest. Her eyes were wide, darting toward the window every time a shadow flickered past the streetlights. "Detective," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can hear it. It's close, waiting." Mac clenched his jaw. "We'll figure this out," he said. But even he didn't know if that was true. Suddenly, the phone rang. Harsh, jarring, slicing through the tense silence. Mac picked it up, heart pounding. "Detective Rennie," a voice hissed. Emily's voice. But wrong. Hollow. Warped. "Find me, before it's too late." The line went dead. No static, no background noise. Just silence. Mac's mind raced. He grabbed his coat, flashlight, and Emily's hand. She followed him silently, trembling, but trusting. They couldn't wait. Whatever the shadow was, it was calling them, leading them into danger. They returned to Calton Hill Cemetery. The fog had thickened, rolling over the gravestones like living smoke. Mac's flashlight cut through the mist, revealing the familiar monuments, statues, and mausoleums. Everything seemed normal, but the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Then he saw it, a tomb freshly disturbed. Soil mounded, leaves scattered, and the faint glow of something unnatural leaking from the cracks in the stone. Emily froze. That's where it wants me." Mac stepped closer cautiously. "I'm not letting it take you," he said firmly. A sudden rustle behind them made him spin. Shadowed figures, pale, elongated children, watched from the edge of the mist. Their eyes glowed faintly, hollow and accusing. They didn't move closer, but the air around them seemed alive with anticipation. Mac moved toward the tomb, flashlight shaking. The glow inside pulsed, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The air smelled of wet earth, decay, and something metallic. Emily reached for him. "Detective, the phone, it's ringing again." He looked down. The old rotary phone from the precinct, inexplicably sitting on the ground near the tomb, rang. The sound was distorted, echoing strangely, as if coming from beneath the earth. Mac picked it up. The dial tone hummed, then. Emily's voice. "Detective Rennie, please, hurry." Then a new sound, scratching, rapid, desperate, from inside the tomb. Mac's pulse raced. He had no choice. He opened the heavy stone lid. Inside, a small, pale figure, Emily, or something mimicking her, was clawing at the soil. Her eyes were wide, terrified, but also knowing, as if she understood the danger more than he could comprehend. He reached in, gripping her wrist. A sudden, violent pull jerked him forward. The tomb seemed alive, the walls closing slightly, the soil shifting as though resisting his intrusion. The shadow outside hissed, a low, guttural sound. Figures emerged, circling. The mist swirled violently, forming shapes that looked like twisted versions of Emily, each screaming silently. Mac yanked her free, stumbling backward. The lid slammed shut behind him, sealing the tomb with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the fog. Emily collapsed against him, gasping. "It's not over, it's still there," she whispered. Mac held her close. "I know. But we're going to face it. Together." The shadows in the cemetery remained, just at the edge of the fog. They didn't attack, not yet. They watched. Patient. Waiting for their next opportunity. Mac looked down at Emily, pale and trembling. "We need answers," he said. "We need to know what it wants, what it is. And we need to end this before it's too late." A sudden movement in the mist caught his eye. A tall figure emerged, like the one at the mausoleum before. Silent, foreboding. Its face remained hidden, but the pull Mac had felt before returned, stronger than ever. Emily's hand tightened around his coat. "Detective, it knows you're here," she whispered. Mac nodded. "I know. But we're not running anymore." The shadow stopped at the edge of the tomb. And then it spoke, not Emily's voice this time, but deep, hollow, echoing through the fog. "Detective Rennie, the girl is mine. The living cannot intervene." Mac swallowed, gripping Emily's hand tighter. He took a step forward. "She's not yours." The fog thickened, wrapping around them. Shapes danced, whispers rose, and the very air seemed to tremble with the presence of the dead. Mac's mind raced. He had seen impossible things tonight. Calls from beyond death. Shadows moving like living entities. And Emily, both lifeless and alive, at the center of it all. But he knew one thing. He couldn't leave her here. Not now. Not ever. The shadow moved closer, and the ground beneath Max shifted, forcing him to his knees. Emily cried out, clinging to him. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the shadow retreated into the fog, melting away, leaving only a lingering cold. Mac helped Emily to her feet. "It's not gone," he said. "It's waiting. And it will come again." Emily nodded silently, tears streaming down her face. "I can feel it, calling me." Mac's jaw tightened. He knew the fight wasn't over. Whatever haunted the graveyards of Edinburgh, whatever claimed Emily, it wasn't finished. And the true horror was only beginning. The following evening, the fog rolled over Edinburgh like a living blanket, thick and suffocating. Mac Rennie sat in his car outside Emily's flat, the engine off, eyes fixed on the dimly lit street. Every shadow seemed longer, every corner darker, as if the city itself were holding its breath. He knew the shadow wouldn't wait forever. Emily sat quietly beside him, pale and trembling. "Detective. I heard it again," she whispered. "It's talking to me. From the tomb." Mac's hand clenched the steering wheel. "I know. And we need to understand what it wants. We can't keep reacting. We have to confront it." She nodded, though fear clouded her eyes. "It knows we're close. And it's angry." The call had come again that morning, a distorted, half-human whisper, luring them back to Calton Hill Cemetery. Mac knew ignoring it would be worse. Whatever it was, it thrived on attention, feeding on fear and curiosity. They approached the cemetery cautiously, flashlight beams cutting through the fog. Gravestones jutted like jagged teeth, statues looming like silent witnesses. Every step crunched on wet leaves, and every sound seemed amplified, echoing unnaturally across the mist. Then Mac saw it, the ground near the tomb had shifted again. Soil raised, scattered leaves, as if something, or someone, had been digging from below. The air smelled of decay, coppery and raw. Emily froze, clutching his arm. Mac crouched, shining his flashlight over the disturbed earth. Something glinted, metal. A small locket, half buried. He picked it up, brushing away the mud. Inside was a tiny, faded portrait of a young girl, her eyes impossibly lifelike, almost accusatory. Emily gasped. "That's me." Mac frowned. "No, it's not you. But it's connected. Whoever, or whatever, is haunting you, it's leaving clues. Mocking us." Suddenly, a faint whisper rose from the fog, curling around them like smoke. "Detective, you cannot stop what has already begun." Emily shivered violently. It's saying my name. Over and over." Mac's pulse quickened. The fog shifted unnaturally, forming shapes, twisted, elongated versions of Emily, each one whispering and pointing toward the tomb. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "Stay behind me," Mac instructed, gun drawn. He stepped forward toward the tomb. The air around it vibrated, heavy with malevolence. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but he couldn't. Not now. As he approached, the earth trembled slightly. Then, a voice, Emily's voice, but wrong, echoed from beneath the soil. "Detective, help me." A hand shot out from the freshly turned ground, pale and trembling, grasping for Mac. He yanked it, pulling a shadowy figure free, a distorted version of Emily, eyes hollow, lips parted in a silent scream. Emily cried out. "No. That's not me." The shadow figure writhed in his grip, and then, as quickly as it appeared, it dissipated into mist. The locket in Mac's hand vibrated, as though alive. He opened it. A tiny inscription inside read, "She is not yours to save." Mac's heart sank. Whoever, or whatever, was controlling these events was aware of their every move. It wasn't just haunting Emily, it was playing a game, testing limits, feeding on terror and curiosity alike. Emily sank to her knees, trembling violently. "Detective, why me? Why now?" Mac helped her up, voice firm despite the dread creeping through him. "I don't know. But we're not done. And we're going to find answers. No matter what it takes." Then the ground shifted again. From the fog, pale figures emerged, circling, their whispers growing louder. Not just Emily, others, long dead, ancient victims, all converging. Their eyes seemed to bore into Mac, into Emily, into the very ground beneath their feet. Mac realized then the horror was not just in the tomb. It had spread. The shadow had allies. And every moment they delayed, every fear they felt, it grew stronger. He tightened his grip on Emily's hand. "We face it tonight," he said, voice low but resolute. "No running. No hiding. We confront it." Emily nodded, tears streaking her face, fear and trust mingling in her wide eyes. I'm ready," she whispered. Mac took a deep breath, stepping toward the center of the fog-shrouded cemetery. The figures around them shifted, forming a circle. The whispers rose into a chorus of tortured voices. The tomb loomed at the center, black stone gleaming faintly in the fog. The shadow was patient. But so were they now. Mac's eyes met Emily's. "Whatever happens, we stay together. And we finish this." From the tomb, the ground heaved violently, and a voice, deep and echoing, carried over the mist. "You dare defy the dead? You will join them, forever." Mac gritted his teeth. He knew this night would change everything. For Emily, for himself, for the city that had hidden these secrets for centuries. And as the fog thickened, curling around the gravestones like tendrils, Mac realized one chilling truth: the dead weren't just watching. They were waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The fog was thicker than ever, curling through the narrow streets of Edinburgh like living fingers. Mac Rennie led Emily cautiously through the graveyard gates, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the mist. Every gravestone seemed taller, every statue more grotesque. The night air was heavy, metallic, carrying whispers that seemed to crawl along the cobblestones. Emily clung to his arm, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Detective, it's here. I can feel it, closer." Mac didn't answer. He had learned long ago that talking often invited the shadows to strike sooner. He focused on the tomb at the heart of the cemetery, the source of the haunting. The ground around it was disturbed, soil shifted, as if it had been breathing, alive. A sudden sound made him freeze, a low, guttural whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You cannot save her, you cannot save yourself." Emily gasped, pulling back. "It's saying my name again." Mac scanned the fog. Shapes moved between the gravestones, pale, distorted figures of children, some barely visible, others more solid, their hollow eyes watching, waiting. The shadows weren't mindless. They were calculating, aware, and they knew why he was here. At the tomb, the soil trembled violently. A hand shot up from the earth, thin, pale, desperate. Mac grabbed it, yanking a figure free. Emily screamed. It was not her, but a twisted mockery, her features distorted in pain and rage. The figure writhed, its eyes glowing faintly, and whispered in a voice that chilled him to the bone. "Bring her, or join her." Mac's grip tightened. He knew he couldn't fight with brute force. This was not a mortal enemy. The shadows fed on fear, on hesitation, on the very essence of life. Then Emily screamed, pointing toward the dense fog. "Detective! Look! Behind you!" He spun. The mist parted to reveal the shadow itself, a towering, amorphous figure, writhing and pulsing with dark energy. Its presence pressed on him like a physical weight, suffocating, overwhelming. Every instinct screamed to run, but Mac stood his ground. Emily's voice trembled beside him. It wants me back." Mac swallowed. "Not while I'm here." The shadow's form shifted, revealing glimpses of otherworldly horrors, twisted faces, hands reaching, eyes that reflected centuries of malice. Its whispers became louder, a chorus of the dead echoing in his mind. Each voice a memory, each scream a warning. Suddenly, a cold wind tore through the cemetery, scattering leaves and fog. The shadow recoiled slightly, then surged forward. Mac felt the ground tremble beneath him, the gravestones vibrating as if the earth itself recognized the presence of the living. Emily clutched his coat. "Detective, it's going to take me." Mac didn't respond verbally. Instead, he focused on the locket he had found, the one that pulsed with unnatural energy. He pressed it against Emily's chest. The glow intensified, cutting through the fog, pushing back the darkness just enough to reveal the tomb's entrance. The shadow hissed, recoiling from the light. Its form flickered, unstable. It shrieked, a sound that wasn't just heard, but felt in the bones, rattling every nerve. Mac took Emily's hand. "We go now. Inside the tomb. That's where this ends." Together, they approached the entrance. The air grew colder, thicker, carrying the smell of wet earth and decay. Every step felt heavier, as though the shadows were reaching through the fog to pull them back. Inside the tomb, the darkness pressed closer. The walls seemed to breathe, the stone groaning under unseen weight. Emily trembled violently, tears streaming down her face. "Detective. I can feel it. Watching, waiting." Mac held her tightly. "I know. But we're facing it now. No running." Then the whispers stopped. Silence, heavy and suffocating, filled the space. Mac's flashlight flickered, casting shadows that danced along the walls. From the darkness, a figure emerged, the shadow itself, more solid now, its eyes glowing like coals, reaching out with hands that seemed to absorb light. Mac raised the locket. The glow intensified, striking the shadow. It recoiled with a hiss that shook the tomb. The pale, twisted figures of children appeared around it, wailing, trying to restrain it, but the light from the locket pushed them back too. Emily's voice, strong and clear, cut through the tension. "Detective. I can fight it too. I can help." Mac nodded. "Do it. Together." They held the locket between them, its glow expanding, filling the tomb with blinding light. The shadow screamed, a sound that seemed to tear the air itself. For a moment, time hung suspended, then, with a violent shudder, the shadow dissipated, melting into fog and mist. The tomb fell silent. Only the faint echo of the past remained. Mac and Emily stood, trembling but alive. The fog outside seemed less oppressive, almost retreating. Emily sank to her knees. "Is it over?" Mac helped her up, gripping her hand. "For now. But this city, it holds many secrets. We've only scratched the surface. We'll have to be ready, always." As they exited the tomb, the mist parted. The gravestones seemed ordinary again, but the memory of the shadow lingered, its eyes, its whispers, the way it had known them, hunted them. Mac knew the fight wasn't over. Shadows like that didn't disappear. They waited, patient, for the next chance to strike. But tonight, at least, Emily was safe. And together, they would uncover the truth, whatever it took. The air in Edinburgh was unnaturally still, a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed down on Mac, Rennie and Emily as they returned to the streets from Calton Hill Cemetery. The city's fog had receded slightly, but shadows still lingered, dark and watchful. Every street lamp flickered, every alley seemed to breathe, and every sound, the distant clang of a gate, the whisper of a breeze, felt like it carried the echoes of the tomb. Emily clung tightly to Mac's arm, her face pale but resolute. "It's gone, right?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mac shook his head, eyes scanning the foggy streets. "Gone for now. But nothing that follows you from the dead ever truly disappears." The locket, now dim but still warm in Emily's hand, pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat, a reminder of what they had faced. "It wants me," she whispered. "I can feel it, even when it's not here." Mac nodded, determination hardening his features. "Then we'll face it if it comes. Together." They walked in silence for a while, the fog curling around their feet, twisting into shapes that mimicked the horrors they had seen in the tomb. Each step was heavy with memory, the whispering voices, the pale figures of children, the towering shadow. And yet, they moved forward, refusing to give the darkness any ground. When they reached the quiet square near her flat, Emily paused. She turned toward the distant cemetery, staring into the mist. "Detective, why me? Why did it choose me?" Mac exhaled slowly, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Because you were alive enough to be noticed. Because it thrives on fear, curiosity, and life. But you're stronger than it expected." A sudden movement in the fog caught Mac's attention. Pale figures emerged from the shadows, children, ghosts, spirits of the wronged, circling silently at the edges of the street. Their eyes glowed faintly, accusatory, expectant. Emily tensed. "It's them." Mac tightened his grip on her hand. "No. They're warnings. Reminders. They aren't the enemy, not yet." A faint whisper rose from the mist, familiar now, hollow and eerie. "Detective Rennie, you cannot save her forever." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she held her head high. "Then I'll fight. I'm not afraid." Mac nodded, pulling her close. "You don't have to be afraid. Not while I'm here." The fog began to shift, swirling violently around them. The air shimmered as if time itself had grown heavy. For a moment, it felt like the city held its breath. Then, slowly, the shadows receded, pulling back into the cemetery, leaving the streets eerily quiet. Mac and Emily stood together, shaking but alive. The city around them seemed normal again, though Mac knew better. Darkness lingered in Edinburgh, hidden in alleys, tombs, and hearts. Emily looked at him, determination replacing fear. "We need to uncover the truth. The whole story, of the shadows, the girl, the tomb." Mac nodded. "And we will. One step at a time. But tonight, we survived." They walked into the misty night, the city silent around them. The tomb on Calton Hill remained, quiet but waiting, its secrets buried deep, but not gone. Somewhere in the shadows, the whispering would begin again, calling to those curious enough to listen. And as they disappeared into the fog, Mac Rennie knew one thing: the dead never truly rest. But neither would the living. Thank you for joining this chilling journey. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales that will haunt your nights. Comment below where you watched from, and tell us, would you dare visit Calton Hill after dark?